Hello, very warm welcome and good afternoon from here and a sunny day. It'd be great to have this opportunity to open up this talk today, Mastering the Mind, Guiding Thoughts with Wisdom and Calm. And I feel this quote by Plato is very apt. The first and great victory is to conquer yourself. And of course, the word conquer should be done with wisdom and calm. And what is that that we are trying to master? And today we have Konstantina, who's psychologist, originally from Greece and now living in Bristol, and has been a student of yoga meditation for around 6 years. So she'll be sharing her wisdom from both sides. And so I just want to mention today format is interactive. If you would like to type in the chat, you're very welcome. If you type it to myself, I will be able to come into sound with that, not directly to Konstantina. So yeah, well, welcome again, and handing over to Bristol, and good afternoon. Thank you. Hello.
Hello, everyone. I will be sharing my screen. So I have a little presentation, but hopefully, as Sarah said, we try to make it as interactive as possible. So the topic of today's talk is about the mind and mastering the mind. And oh, I think for some reason it's not changing the slide.
We usually have some fun with technology, so yeah, you might have to reshare.
Let me go again. It's very interesting. Sorry.
One day it will be foolproof, but at the moment it's always something.
So
Yeah.
let me go. If we go from the beginning, I wonder whether we need to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one.
Okay, but that's fine. Okay. So as I was saying before, so that will do it. But do I need now to, what can you see?
Mastering the mind.
And is that okay?
Yeah. Mind is a
Okay.
powerful and useful tool.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
So there's no doubt that, mind is a powerful and useful tool. And actually, particularly in Raja Yoga philosophy, to be able to master the mind, understand and master the mind, definitely affects the quality of our life. And again, no doubt it can lead to a more peaceful and elevated life. But equally, depending on how we're using our mind, even though, it can really free us equally, if we don't learn how to master it, it can actually limit and in many cases imprison us. And if we think about the current state of our mind, probably most of you will agree with me that actually most of the times thinking happens to us. In other words, thinking is what we call involuntary. You might, relate to times where throughout the day, certain thoughts pops into our minds that actually we haven't invited them. We don't want to have them. And sometimes they arrive very unexpectedly. So it could be that all of a sudden, we worry about something that might happen in the future, or some thoughts have a different, I suppose, kind of format, if you like. They tend to be more repetitive, and they almost like, like a tape or a play in our mind that they can keep going on for years sometimes. And we might not be aware that it's almost like our mind has been hijacked by a certain wave of thoughts. Normally, thoughts like this have to do with maybe things that have happened in our past, and they can take the form of, why that happened to me, what people could have done or couldn't have done for us. Or they can be repetitive beliefs that we might have formed about ourselves or other people or the world, such as, I'm not good enough, others are not to be trusted, or the world is a dangerous place to live. So the thinking we're talking about mostly at the moment is kind of negative thinking, unhelpful thinking, as we call it. And what happens, thinking doesn't operate in isolation. So it interacts with other systems or in us. So our thinking would definitely generate certain emotions. So negative thoughts kind of make sense, generate negative emotions. And imagine, if that is going on for a long period of time, particularly when we talk about these kind of thoughts that they almost like a tape in our mind, they, if you like, create very negative emotional states that after a while, the thought might not be there, but this emotional state that the thought has created in the first place, and then we perpetuate with the negative thinking, it kind of almost like has taken over our body, our energy. And that's very important to understand that, sometimes we are in a kind of a loop when the thoughts affects our feelings, and then our feelings then go back and affect, keep these kind of thoughts going. And of course, we shouldn't ignore in this equation the impact it has on our body. So there's a lot of research now to show that there is a very strong correlation between our emotions or emotional states and physical illness, because our body, negative feelings or negative cognitions do disrupt the natural flow of our energy, and can actually be very toxic for the body. And also, sometimes when thoughts become quite persistent, it can actually affect the way we act, and we might actually start, or we might find ourselves act in a way that actually we didn't intend to. That can be on a very small scale. It could be an example that, I might start the day with very good intentions, that I might stay peaceful and, calm. And then all of a sudden, I'm finding myself in a conflict. What happened there? Probably, something in my environment triggers something in me. So a thought came to my mind, and that thought actually had enough momentum to pull me along. And then, I react in a way that then later on, I kind of regret. I might say something that I didn't mean to say, or I might do something that I didn't mean to do. So, I mean, we can talk about very small examples here, but actually in a very extreme cases, when somebody gets very fixated, people get very fixated in certain ways of thinking, actually that can lead to far more serious conditions such as paranoia, when somebody's fixated on this idea that everyone is plotting against them, or psychosis, where kind of, I'm not in touch with reality. So these are, I suppose, some examples, kind of everyday examples that we can all maybe relate to, and a bit more extremes, where we no longer rule the mind, and actually, if anything, the mind rules us. And if we go a little bit deeper to understand why is that happening, I suppose particularly Raja Yoga teaching, I suppose kind of shed quite a lot of light in that. And we are more likely, I suppose, to find ourselves in this kind of ways of thinking when our mind is ruled by the ego. And what I'm just going to very briefly explain a little bit about what we mean by ego is when we identify, or we derive, if you like, our sense of identity or who we are based on things in the physical dimension. So in some ways, there is a completely there's no acknowledgement of our spiritual sense, and we derive a sense of who we are based on things like our gender, our age, our physical appearance, our possessions, or positions that we have, and then when we understand ourselves and who we are based on that, that's when we what we mean when we say that the mind is ruled by the ego. And what that does is that we build, if you like, a very narrow-minded identity. We can call it the little me, which actually lives in constant fear. And the reason it lives in constant fear is because everything that is based its identity on is very unstable, because nothing in this physical dimension is ever stable. So there's always that insecurity underneath, or whatever it is that I'm, derive my identity from, that it can go at any time. And with it, my sense of identity will go. So there's always this underlying fear that I suppose lead us to have quite a lot of desires and needs. But the interesting thing is, no matter how much, that's why, we say the mind, then our sense of who we are, is always in a state of not enough, because no matter how much we get, we always going to feel empty, because we know anything can go at any time. So not only we're feeling, not enough, but we are constantly, greedy. We're trying to get more. And that, of course, can inflict a lot of suffering. So there's a really nice metaphor, which I found it very helpful here, where in Asian philosophy, Socrates said the image of the soul as a charioteer guiding two horses. One is black horse, which is wild and unruly and quite destructive, and the other is the white horse, which is noble and disciplined. And we see that here, and it's a quite nice metaphor, I suppose, to use and understand what happens when the soul, if you like, is asleep or is awake. So when the soul, which is the charioteer, is awake, the charioteer can guide actually both horses. It can rule the black one, so the black obeys to it, and then that means that the white one can actually take the lead and lead the way. But when the soul is asleep, then the white horse takes control, and that leads to distraction. And that's what happens with when the ego rules the mind or rules our thoughts. Then, these thoughts arise from a place, as we said, of lack and insecurity. And of course, the black, the ego is in charge. And that's what happens when we found ourselves, it pull us, in different directions that we kind of feel that we've never chosen, we don't want to go down to, but that's where we found ourselves going. And there's a lot of distraction for us, there's a lot of suffering that comes from that. I wanted here to say a little bit more about how in the world of psychology we deal with this, with negative thoughts, because actually most of psychological problems boil down to inability, I suppose, to control our mind. So people come to therapy sometimes because they've been tormented literally by their mind. And there's many times where people come and say, I just want, to stop having these thoughts, stop worrying, stop thinking about the past, expressing really an inability to do so. And so some techniques have to do that more from mindfulness. It's about distancing ourselves from the thoughts. So we, particularly, this is very good with repetitive thoughts or thoughts that they are not useful. There's nothing that can come out of thinking about them. So sometimes we use metaphors such as view your thoughts as buses that you don't want to get on. And sometimes because we ask people to identify themes in their thinking. So let's say if there is a theme of self-critical thinking, you might say, oh, this is bus number 40. And you say, I'm not going to get on it. I'm just going to watch it, pass it by. So I'm not feeding it. And normally that's what happens. We feed the thoughts and we go into a kind of a roll bowling. Snowboarding situation with it. Another one is what we call cognitive restructuring. So this is more about helping people to identify negative thoughts, and then we help them to identify any unhelpful thinking habits, as we call them. So there are lots of different unhelpful thinking habits, from all or nothing thinking, personalizing, catastrophizing, minimizing positives, mental filtering, all kind of things. And then we help people to use the logical, not the emotional, as we say, mind, and see things in a more rational way, using evidence for and against, and come with what we call not positive, but more balanced, more realistic ways of thinking. And sometimes we use relaxation because we said that the way that we think affects our body. So sometimes, it's really difficult to intervene with the thoughts. They can be so persistent. So sometimes we help people to, as we say, harmonize their fight or flight that might be activated if I'm in a constant state of anxiety, for example. So we use breathing techniques or imaginary meditation, and that can help people, to calm the mind. Once I start using breathing, the mind calms, and then there's more space, I suppose, for see things from a different perspective. Now, in Raja Yoga philosophy, we go much deeper. Um, really, here we introduce the idea that we are not just the human. There's not just the human dimension in us. We're also there's also the being. There is more to our identity, and the true self, which is the soul, is very different to a human dimension. In our teachings, we understand that the soul is eternal, is peaceful, is unchanging. It's beyond the limitations of the physical world. And in that way, of course, I'm not then the story. I'm not the identity that I have built around the story of my life. And for definite, I'm not my emotions and I'm not my thoughts. The true self is what we say is this being of light, not of this world, and has very, very different qualities. And if we want the soul to be the charioteer, and it's the one that actually rules, I need to be a living expression of these qualities, because in some ways we have forgotten that. We have forgotten, our spiritual dimension. So we need to find ways not only to understand and step back from ego, but also be able to reactivate and these qualities of the soul, this experience of the soul, and make them a living expression. And some of them, is the quality of the soul is peace. And so some of these qualities is peace. So if I want peace, that means that I become less reactive when I'm confronted with challenging people and situations. So there's a very big difference in terms of how I'm going to deal with the situation. If I deal with it from a position where I understand and experience myself as an internal divine being that is, beyond harm, and very different if I meet this situation from a place where I feel that I am the little me, that anything actually can be a threat to me. So this, I suppose, requires a big shift in consciousness, but actually that is our aim. And there's a different emotional state also that is present, which is joy. And that again it's a joy that stems from knowing who I am, and is not dependent on external situations or things or people. So I derive the joy in my life from within, and the soul is very loving because experiences a love that is unconditional, and that love can only be possible when it comes from a place of fullness. So, from a realization that I lack nothing. So I need nothing. And this, is a decision and a choice that we need to make again and again until in the current state that we are, it becomes a natural state. So that's why, we need to be quite alert and And we need, if you like, to have goals for our day. And finally, here, again, in the same kind of story, when the soul, I suppose, rules the black horse, and the white one is in charge, it's very interesting, because what we see is that it aims to wisdom, and it's the goddess Athena, which is the goddess of wisdom, that actually is leading the carrots. And that's interesting, because for us, again, is the wisdom is knowledge, isn't it? It's the knowledge we're getting. The spiritual, when the spiritual knowledge becomes, which is wisdom, becomes our compass, this allow us to experience that shift in consciousness and think about things with more clarity. And as I said before, with this awareness, not only we observe the mind, so we can actually reposition ourselves if we find out that we've been pulled in different directions. So at least we are awake in that way. We understand it's not happening automatically to us. At least we've got this awareness to put it right. But also, the more we experience soul consciousness, and the more, knowledge and wisdom is our compass, the more free we are from these fluctuations that we otherwise experience of emotions or thoughts throughout the day or throughout our lives. So this was from me. I don't know where we are with time, Sarah. I hope I didn't go through that very quickly.
We're good with time, so yes, we can open up for questions and comments. So do feel free to type in the chat. And I find this image of the two horses and the charioteer like very tangible. And when you were saying that don't get on that bus, the critical thinking bus number 40 example, then we are as if empowering that charioteer. So, and then now you're speaking of spiritual wisdom, but anything that gives us this bigger picture that, oh, we don't have to jump on the bus. There's actually a choice here. And so in a way, it feels like the first step and a very important step to empower that charioteer. So that would be interesting to hear if this is how you see it. So no, it's not just observing, that's what you're saying, but it's also steering, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But first, I need to know that quite a lot of our thinking, I suppose, it's very what we call automatic. We're not aware of it. We are very aware of our feelings, most of us, but we're not aware of our thinking. It always surprises me when, I suppose, in therapy, people can tell you a lot about how they feel, but when you ask them how they think, they find that really difficult. They need time to think about their thinking. So, and to bring that awareness of how I think, it's important, because then I know what's going on, what is, and then, as you said, I can make decisions of which way I want things to go. But as we said, not always, because when we have thoughts that they are connected with very strong negative emotional states, and I think sometimes that people find that quite difficult.
Yes, it feels like that we don't necessarily question the thoughts. So we have a thought, and as if we think that must be true, but it doesn't make sense. If you read in the newspaper or on social media, you don't think, oh, this is the way it is. You always have the discrimination. So in a way, it feels very much like understanding the topic of identity and the true self is the key to having that little discrimination. Is this coming from the insecure little me who is maybe not feeling belittled? It could be like an overinflated sense of self. Is it coming from a distorted vision, or is it coming from security? So how do you, what is your practice to help discriminate the thoughts? Is it coming from the right space, as it were?
Mm. Well, if it comes from the wrong place, we get negative emotions. So the healthy mind would generate healthy emotions and healthy actions. That's why, it will come from a place, it will, our thinking and our actions will actually express the higher qualities of the soul. When we are when we experience negative emotions such as sadness, fear, anxiety, envy, then we know it's the little me that is in operation, not the one that actually can see beyond the story. Another good sign is how preoccupied I am with the story of my life. How preoccupied, how much time of my mind is actually consumed by things that happened in the past. And the past could be years ago, or it could be yesterday, or like 2 hours ago. And how much is consumed about things that potentially could or could not happen in the future, which is, that's why I assume some people here are quite familiar with the BK teachings. So many times it's been highlighted not to be, to be free from the story, or to put a full stop. That's exactly what we mean, that I'm not consumed by the story, and I'm not trying to change it. That's where I am the detached observer, because I know I'm kind of indifferent to the story.
So it would be good to understand, because you've got these two sides of your training practice. So you're aware of the need to be gentle also, because what can happen to some of us is a kind of repressing, and it could be through, someone is sharing in the chat, they can use like recreational drugs. People use alcohol a lot. It's not the problem, they see it as a solution to how to avoid this. So sometimes we suppress in different ways, distraction. So in a way, we need to also see what's coming up. But at the same time, you also mentioned the need to shift and to, as if, put it in some context, that we actually feel worse when we dwell and ruminate, and that, in a way, we're trying to escape from that, but in a way that doesn't address the issue. So you're bringing this angle, to see it as a story, to get as if that space. Would you like to share a bit more about that? Because we don't want to misuse sometimes spiritual ideas and miss the learning as well. So I know you've got a very nice understanding of both worlds. It'd be good to hear how you approach this aspect, if the question is clear.
Yeah, I suppose we definitely don't want to repress things. And I suppose spirituality helps us to go beyond the story. So as I said before, the emotion might be there. So I might experience something, And the mind might come and say, oh, I shouldn't be feeling like this. If I'm um, a awake soul, I shouldn't be experiencing this feeling. The idea here is or the practice, if you like, is to notice the emotion, but then to bring maybe things from knowledge to help you to get a different perspective over it. An example of that is that if something happens to me, that it wasn't, lots of things happen to us that, of course, in dimension we name them as good or bad. But let's say an accident or something like this, or a big argument with somebody. Of course, if there's something we can do to change, that's absolutely fine to do that. But to go into the why did that happen to me, for example, it's never going to be useful after a while. If I use that as an example, in our teachings, I suppose, we understand that there needs to be a sense of acceptance of what's going on, with the knowledge that everything, there is a reason, there's a bigger picture of why something has happened. But actually, in the deeper sense of who I am, that doesn't affect me. That, I suppose, can get me out of a vicious cycle of actually questioning why something has happened, which actually, particularly when we work with trauma, is something that can keep people stuck for years, literally, and create lots of self-pity. And another, I suppose, way is sometimes when we have an emotion, we can acknowledge it, but not add a narrative to it. So that actually means that the feeling cannot stay alive for too long if I don't feed it with a story. So I have a feeling, and then, a thing comes to mind, like, and that always happened to me, and then this person did this to me, and blah, blah. So I acknowledge it, and maybe, with some meditation or I just let it, it will run its course, and it will kind of fade away.
It's useful just to see this language you're using, acknowledge it, but don't create a narrative. So it is like the gentleness, isn't it? So nothing is being denied, but we don't have to add to it as if. And that kind of observing the thoughts. And I liked, you're saying it's almost like coming out of the victim mindset, because it's so debilitating, but bringing in this aspect that there's an aspect of me that is not being affected or harmed, that you always have that place to come from and see it. There's a couple of questions coming up here. Is addiction a manifestation of being ruled by the mind, or is addiction something else?
Definitely, I would say, because addiction means I have no control. Addiction means I'm addicted to, I can't manage my behavior. I have a need, and that need is ruling my life. And in some cases, it's completely ruining my life. Most cases with addictions, particularly alcohol or substance use. And the need to go there stems from something that I'm lacking in the way that I feel about myself, or about the world, or about the people. So yes, I think definitely. And it's almost like, you can't, even if it's a small addiction, I'm thinking that something I can relate to, coffee addiction or maybe chocolate addiction, that, these are not addictions that necessarily will ruin our lives, but they rule our mind. You can't get that thought out of your mind. You just think about that chocolate. And that's a good way to illustrate habits in that way, what habits do. Also, all of these things, all this, whether it's alcohol, chocolate, caffeine, what do? They numb things in us. Okay. It's a way of regulating our emotions, which means that we have lost our natural abilities to regulate. These are not our normal ways to regulate feelings. um, Actually, in our natural state, we don't need to regulate feelings. It's all regulated.
When I was quite new to these ideas, it felt a little bit abstract, like who spends so much time thinking about thoughts, but I would find writing really helpful. And you reminded me when you said about regulating your thoughts and feelings, because I was having a lot of change at the time, and so I noticed there was some ego that was getting like challenged, with a different job situation, and finding insecure. So I would write down the idea about our nature of being guests in this physical world, and as you mentioned, being an observer, and just that stepping back and seeing the bigger picture. I was just writing it down.
Yeah.
It was just words at the time, but it created a feeling. So I realized I can regulate my mood. I don't have to run out, and I used to love traveling, I think, as an escape. And I realized this small shift, but it was important for how I felt, and that was very empowering. We can regulate. So yes, agree with it.
Mhm.
Someone is
Yeah.
asking, yeah,
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
add anything?
Yeah, I suppose you're not dependent on external things to regulate anymore. That's it. That's a huge freedom. That's the freedom actually we're all looking for.
And it's
Mhm.
tied together with perhaps a sense of self-respect or self-regard, that otherwise we sort of always think we need something. I mean, of course,
Yeah.
that habit can still come, but just as a huge potential, we have to claim
Mhm.
all this back, as if the charioteer's got the reins again,
Yeah.
and through understanding. Someone is asking, to what extent can psychological problems be helped with these, spiritual teachings such as Raj Yoga and the practices, and where are the limits when, say, medication may be required? Like, how do we know what is
I don't think that the one excludes the other. That's a personal opinion. Somebody else might have a different one. There are occasions where medication has a space, because in this spiritual journey, we all at different phases. Some of us, I suppose, um, can put things into practice more and benefit from it. Others are more, the journey is different for all of us. So I wouldn't say, oh, you shouldn't. Of course, probably the need to go there is going to be less, but I wouldn't say that the one, should exclude the other for some cases. Um, I don't think there are any limitations in terms of um, I think you need to be quite, because it's so radical. I found that the people who are more receptive to spiritual teaching are the people who actually had a little bit of a flavor and a sense of the fleeting nature of a physical world and life as we understand it. They had a little bit what we call a crash of ego. Yeah. Then people are more receptive, um, to, and I think I'm not sure whether I'm answering. I think that was the question, can people be helped by the spiritual? And I think that is an observation. I think people are far more receptive there. But I don't want to say, I never feel like there's only one way for everyone. Things can be in combination.
Yeah, nice. So any follow-up comments, thoughts, feel free. Yeah, that makes sense. Someone is asking, how do we get back to being able to regulate our emotions naturally?
Yeah, that's a big question, isn't it? But that's the soul consciousness, isn't it? That's a spiritual journey, isn't it? So I would say there are, as we said before, if we go back to that metaphor, so that is, the way, and then it's the talking, and then it's the walking. So the way is, I need first of all to identify which ego identities rule my life. Yeah, we all are going to have different ego identities that are going to be more dominant than others. Some people might be I'm just giving some examples, because ego identities, there are some very obvious ones and more subtle ones. But somebody might derive a very big sense of who they are by the way they look, for example, other by their titles, others by their opinions, by their knowledge they got. So first of all, we need to understand that side of things and step back from these things. And then as we do that, we need to really, as I said before, live our lives in line with the qualities of the soul. Because really the big test is how we operate when we interact with others and in life. As we said, I can have a very peaceful mind with meditating, which of course it helps. But then what happens when I have a trigger? Which part of me do I bring in the forefront, and how strong that soul consciousness is in me to be able to sustain me in my everyday life? So it's I think that's the practice here.
It feels like we need to give ourselves the best possible chance and ground ourselves in that, as if a primary experience of those core qualities, where we are as if giving the mind a complete holiday from needing to think about anything of the physical world. Because we might take a nap for 5 minutes. We don't need to think about things in the same way, but consciously to rise above and really be in that
Yes.
experience.
Yes.
That strength, isn't it? And I think
Yes,
we
of
touched
course. It's that
on,
consciousness, isn't it? Yeah. Because anything else, like as you said, even the sleeping, or it can actually not necessarily, yes, it's not, it's substitute for regulating.
it's a practice, and I think that you mentioned about this being like a story, and I think that method where we just bring that thought, everything that happened so far today was as if in a story, and something like all these thoughts that are about the story just as if get a little bit less momentum, because it's an addiction to thinking that we perhaps see with cyclical thoughts, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Couple of questions here. In a bad situation that happens, do we pretend that nothing happened, or should we try to understand it?
I'll definitely try to understand. We can't pretend. That is but not being pulled into it. If I don't, I can't operate without you know, we learn from things. So there might be a learning there. I need to pay attention to if some, but I don't need to become a victim of what happened there. I don't need to dwell on it. I take the learning and move on. And yeah, I don't go into that mentality of being a victim or of self-pity. Of course, it depends from one situation to another, but that's why the mind is there. You know, there are times where we need to think what happened in a situation, but not in an obsessive way. And for the soul, you know, it really doesn't matter what happens in the story. And I think in some ways that's a good thing to use as well. So I'm taking the learning, but I know that I'm kind of indifferent to it at the same time.
This is a useful reference point, isn't it? This life lived in alignment with the qualities of the soul, you know, that feeling beyond harm, you know, that there is a sense of the being which is enduring, and we can come back to it. And then from there we can deal with things, but not as a victim. We can bring our mind to it, but not to try to solve it for my feelings. It's like feelings are already, you know, experiencing that bigger picture, and has that freedom inside, and then dealing with it, but without panic.
Without panic, yeah.
And I think that that's helpful with spirituality. It gives a direction to the mind, isn't it? This aim to honor the noble, natural noble nature that we are learning about through our own practice. Because otherwise we tend to just think many thoughts, but we need as if to give another thought to replace it with. So, you know, what you've been saying is there's nothing wrong with thoughts, but have the thoughts from the white horse. Let the white horse be the one. Someone is asking, do you think we're overstimulated in this world? And the spiritual practice seems to be based on simplicity and stillness, but it's difficult for many of us. So do you think we're not really designed for this overstimulated world, and how do we manage it?
Definitely not. I mean, I don't even need to, there's a lot of that we are not, it's actually making us ill, I think. And there's an ego identity here, you know, that it can't tolerate it feels the boredom, you know, it needs the different thing to get a buzz from. That's why we kind of, you know, we go from one stimulus to another, because we are lost. But again, that's a personal, but obviously there's a lot of research now that I think in few years time, we're not going to let children anywhere near electronic devices. But in general, we are, you know, bombarded, and I think the problem is we are becoming addicted to it. All these different stimulus. So when there isn't, we experience a huge sense of restlessness and uneasiness.
Feels like like in a physical diet, you've got the empty calories that create a feeling, but they're not good for the body. In fact, you have to use energy to process it, but it's very addictive food. So it feels like a lot of overstimulation is a bit like that, but empty calories. Someone has written, to nourish the white horse and address the unmet need of the black horse is the duty of the charioteer. Nice. And hearing you sharing it makes me think of someone, you know, who's in a busy work environment, and perhaps it's the power of taking these 1 minute breaks. Sometimes it's not that you need a long time, but just to create that pause, a powerful break, to come back to that noble qualities of the soul. And interesting if you have any thoughts on that and any final reflections and maybe a few minutes of meditation to guide us would be nice to give.
I mean, sometimes having like a few seconds to stop and just ask yourself, you know, what is the quality of my emotional state at the moment? Or silences are very important. I think there's few moments of silence, and maybe, you know, if we can bring that soul perspective to play. So but sometimes some other practices is, you know, having a goal for the day. So I set my mind already and I monitor myself how, when I kind of go off the track, you know, how can I go back on track in line with my goal? And yeah, just monitor my responses, you know, to things.
And even a small change, it's very empowering to know we can do it. So even acknowledging those micro experiences. Yeah.
Because I think that idea of a choice is there constantly. I can choose at any time what I'll do, you know. I don't know, will I have my lunch in front of the screen, or will I have my lunch outside somewhere? Will I have a glass of water, or will I have a cup of tea or a coffee? You know, there's a choice. Will I let my mind go that direction, or will I get it that direction? And that's the mastery, isn't it? As well as that I'm the one who's making these choices.
Yeah, very nice. Thank you. And so we're all in our process and everyone is learning, but it's been very nice to hear how you brought the two worlds together and seeing how we can use different techniques. So if we have a couple of minutes left, if you'd like to share some reflections for meditation, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, so we take a few minutes to focus on this being of light, the real light, who is a temporary guest in this physical world. A guest who can temporarily use everything, but it's aware that it doesn't own anything. A guest that enjoys the beauty and the newness of it all, but at the same time doesn't need anything. A guest is free to come and go, is aware of the exit, but it's okay with it. There is no question of possessing anything, because there is no fear of losing anything. The guest stays light, enjoys the journey without carrying anything unnecessary with him. A guest see every moment as rich and perfect in its own right. There's no expectations and remains emotionally independent. that allows the mind to feel free, become calm and peaceful. Om Shanti.
Thank you, Shanti. Thank you so much, Konstantina. I always really appreciate your thought processes and the way you language things. Thanks to everyone for joining. We just posting in the chat details of the next talk with Prashant in 2 weeks, Secret Life of the Mind, Learning to Live with Greater Ease. So we'll meet again, and enjoy and good luck with your experiments, and have a great evening. Thank you. See you next time.
Thank you. Thank you.